Hey everyone, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball, and I was muted. I do not know what's going on with my little stream service here, but it is not my favorite thing. I am one day going to be so big time that I'm going to be able to get like my own producer, so I won't have to worry about any of this stuff. So, welcome. It is Wednesday. I didn't know if I was going to be able to get here and on time because I was fighting with my hair. Do you ever fight with your hair? If you're a guy, you probably don't, but girls probably know what I'm talking about. So, yesterday was a heavy day, right? We talked about the 10 worst women or 10 worst mothers that I featured on Without a Crystal Ball. And so because yesterday was such a heavy day, I figured today we could have a little bit more fun and maybe just talk about some stories that are a little bit lighter. Oops, apologize. I can't promise that all of the stories will be light, but I do promise that you're going to learn something, and some of the stories will be kind of interesting. So if you're not familiar with my column, I write a lot about birth. I am a mother and had my own, my son's birth was like super complicated and just crazy. It was like several days and I needed forceps and he was stuck. And so, ever since my son's birth, I've really been kind of obsessed with birth stories because they're just so fascinating to me. And I actually like to write about birth stuff that's kind of one-off or kind of cool, or stories that you haven't heard about. I also cover a lot of free birth stuff, natural birth, a lot of the home birth world. So there'll be a story about a midwife in here. There's also going to be some science stories, and then there's going to be a crazy story that came from India. So I just wanted to do something a little bit more light. And so today we're going to talk about 5 of the wildest or craziest birth stories that I've featured on my page. So let's start with, let me get it pulled up. So we're going to start with Ebony. So let me get hers up in my out. So this is Ebony. Ebony is a teenager and she actually delivered a baby. This story is wild. So she woke up from a coma and she learned that she had given birth to a surprise baby. So she lives in the United Kingdom and she fell into a coma. She suffered a headache and she went to sleep. When she was sleeping, she suffered a seizure and she went into a coma. At the hospital, doctors determined she was pregnant and they performed an emergency C-section. So here's the skinny. According to Ebony, she had no idea she was pregnant. On a December evening, she went to bed feeling very sick, and while sleeping, she suffered multiple seizures. Her mother, Cherie, called for an emergency assistance or 911 after finding her daughter seizing. When the paramedics arrived, they told Cherie that they believed that Ebony was pregnant. Her mother didn't believe them because Ebony was still having her period and she didn't have a pregnant belly. And then when the medics lifted her shirt, they pointed out to her protruding stomach, and Cherie was shocked with the news of her daughter's pregnancy. So they rushed her to the hospital, and then at the hospital, they clearly confirmed that she's pregnant. Hold on a second. Oh, this is totally frozen. Okay. So at the hospital, the doctors realized that she's got 2 uteruses. So it's a extremely rare condition called uterus didelphius. And so women with the condition have 2 separate uteruses, 2 cervixes, and they can also have 2 vaginas. Because her condition was rare, one of the uteruses that she had continued to menstruate, and then the other one carried the infant. The womb that carried the baby was positioned towards her back, and so she never developed a pregnant baby because the baby developed in the middle of her, kind of in the middle of her back. So tests that were performed at the hospital determined that she suffered the seizures because she had preeclampsia. And so the doctors, they feared for her life and they whooshed her into an emergency C-section. They delivered a healthy 7-pound, 10-ounce baby girl. And despite the lack of all prenatal care, the baby was completely healthy. 4 days after she was born, she woke up from her coma. And when she woke up, she learned she had given birth. She told the BBC that the experience was completely overwhelming. She said, "Meeting my baby was so surreal. It felt like an out-of-body experience. I worried I wouldn't bond with my daughter because I had no time to get my head around her arrival, and I think she's amazing. It's an absolute miracle, and I wouldn't change Elodie for the world." She said after she learned about her baby, the doctors placed Elodie on her chest. And she said, "It sounds awful now, but I asked them to take her away as I was really confused and sure that they'd made a mistake. But my mom explained to me that while the nurses were there, and they gave my little girl back to me and to hold properly for the first time. And although I was so confused and pretty scared, it was a beautiful moment." So due to the baby's size, doctors believe she was full term. Her life has obviously completely changed. She was in school at the time and she was working towards a degree in physiotherapy, and she actually was able to return back to school. But they're more like, I guess doctors are more glad, or it's kind of a miracle that Ebony actually survived, because once preeclampsia gets to the point of seizures, it can become life-threatening for her and for Elodie. And so the fact that, despite the fact that she went into a preeclamptic seizure, they both survived, is pretty amazing. But then the other aspect that's truly amazing is that when you have preeclampsia, when you're pregnant, babies can have fetal growth restriction. They can develop organ failure. Mothers can suffer cardiovascular disease, placental abruption, and a stroke. So the seizures that she had were because of her high blood pressure, but somehow she managed to survive. So it's actually kind of a cool story. When I saw it, I had never heard of a double uterus. It literally was the craziest story I'd ever seen. I was pretty amazed that she was able to get through. She's only 18 years old, and so or 19, so she's like her first year in college. And Elodie, she said, is completely healthy now and totally fine. And it's hard to believe that actually happened, and that was like, I guess the baby survived and she survived. I mean, can you even imagine going to bed and then waking up 4 days later and you have no idea that you're pregnant, and then a doctor places a baby on your chest and is like, "Here, this is your baby." I can't even imagine what that first moment must have been like for her. She must have been so disoriented, and then to think that she had no idea she was pregnant is so crazy. And what's even wilder is that they had no idea she had 2 uteruses. So I guess if you've never had a scan before, but I don't know. I can't imagine waking up in that type of situation. I would probably be laughing, crying, super confused, like, send that baby back. I don't even know. I can't imagine in that type of situation how I would react. But she's handled it like a champ. Her mother said that she's been an amazing mother despite the fact that she wasn't prepared. And everyone is doing really well. So both of them are extremely lucky that they survived. So the next story, this one is crazy. I actually just wrote this one today, but so this is Harper, and she was just born last week. She is a whopping 15 pounds, 5 ounces. And she is 23 and a half inches long. She is the size of a 6-month-old baby, and she was delivered at a hospital in New York. So the mother who had this baby, her name is Joy Buckley. They live in northern, sort of upstate New York, I guess is how they call it. And this baby was sort of a miracle baby because Joy and her husband Norman had been told only a few years ago that she was not, like, there was a very slim chance that she would be able to have a baby. So they were, when she got pregnant, I think they said she had a 15% chance of getting pregnant. And this was after they had been trying for a baby for 7 years. And back in 2016, she became pregnant, and she had a little boy, and the little boy was 11 pounds. So not nearly as big as Harper. So Joy then gets pregnant in 2018, and she finds out she's having a girl. And I really don't know how this baby got so big, to be honest. This sounds crazy, but immediately when I see a baby this large, I immediately go to like out of control diabetes, gestational diabetes, something that caused the baby to grow at such a large fast pace and to get so big. But Joy went into labor, and she was at a hospital in New York. And during her delivery, Harper got stuck underneath her rib cage. And so in order to extract her, it took 3 doctors. They had to use a vacuum and do a C-section. So by the time they got her out, Joy said it felt like she had been hit by 2 tractor trailers. And she said that it hurt unbelievably bad because she got lodged so far up her rib cage. The doctors had such a hard time getting her out. Because the birth took so much effort by the doctors, Harper actually suffered a very traumatic birth. Since her birth, she's been having trouble breathing. They haven't really said, she's a full-term baby, so they haven't really said why she's having trouble breathing. My guess is that she's just so dang big that maybe there's some extra fluid in her lungs, or, you know, she's bigger than her body's bigger than her probably brain is at this time. I don't know. But at this point, Harper has been struggling to breathe, so she's on a little bit of oxygen, so you can see the cannula that's on her nose. It looks like she has a CPAP on there, so it's a high pressure. And they've been monitoring her blood sugar because she's having a hard time maintaining her blood sugar, which is not uncommon with newborns. But she was actually transferred from the hospital to a NICU at a neighboring hospital. And mom has said that she's recovering fine. She's been able to walk. She said that there was enough amniotic fluid in her stomach for there to be 2 babies in there. And Harper is almost 3 times the size of an average newborn. So the average newborn is 6 pounds, and she is 15 pounds, 5 ounces. So she's 2.5 times, I should say, the size of an average newborn. She is, despite all of it, she's doing pretty well. She has 2 siblings that are at home. She has the brother that her mom had just 2 years ago, and then they adopted a boy. So mom and dad didn't think they were ever going to be able to have kids, and now they've had 2 biological children of their own. And so both of the kids are at home while she's still in the NICU. And yeah, she's bigger. So I shared this post, I wrote an article on this. So all of the stuff that I'm talking about in this live today, all of the articles are linked in the thread. in the description. So if you want more details on any of these articles or the links to the original sources, all of that is linked below so you can read everything. It was actually a super sweet story that Joy shared. She was, she really didn't think she was ever going to be able to become a mom. And so to have a baby of her own was like truly a miracle. And now she's had this humongous baby. But get this, this is where it gets even wilder. So according to hospital records, she's the largest baby that they've been able to track since at least 30 years. The Department of Health in the state of New York is checking their records, but they believe that she's the largest baby ever born in New York. And in terms of recent childbirth in like the world, I think the last baby born that was really big was in India. And she even outweighs that baby because I think that baby was like 15 pounds on the dot and she's 15 pounds, 5 ounces. So she outpaces nearly any of the large babies that have been born in the last few years. So there's a high probability that she could be the largest baby ever born in the state of New York. So Joy said that her family has a propensity to deliver very large babies. She said that there was a baby in her family that was 16 pounds. I don't know if that's true or not because, they would probably have records on that if that were the case. But my baby was born and he was 5 pounds. So I was actually thinking about this when I wrote this story and I was like, holy moly, she weighs 3 times more than what my son weighed. And my son at age 1 weighed 17 pounds. So she weighs 2 pounds less at birth than my son did at a year old. And my son was a preemie, you guys, so he wasn't a very big boy to begin with, and he had a little bit of growth. He had some growth issues, but yeah, this child is huge. Joy said that the babies that are in the family, even though they're born big, she said that some of them, despite being large babies, end up becoming more petite as they get older. Mom is 5'8". Dad isn't super tall. I mean, he's tall, but he's not huge. So she doesn't really know what this baby is going to turn out to be. But mom says he's going to become a linebacker. She'll become a linebacker. So I don't know about you, but if you have a vagina, you have to see this baby, and it's got to be hurting because she didn't deliver it through the vagina anyway, but I can't even imagine having that even in my stomach. That had to have hurt so much. And I'm wondering why they didn't say why the baby was so big. They didn't discuss if she had any health complications. They didn't say if she had gestational diabetes. It's hard to know how this happened. Typically when babies are this big or get this big, there's typically a health issue like gestational diabetes where the babies just get way too big. So I am excited for them. It sounds like Harper will be able to get out of the hospital in the next, the doctors say soon, so I don't really know what that means. But so she's supposed to get out of the hospital soon and they expect her to do well. So I could not believe this when I saw this, you guys. I was, holy moly. So thankfully everyone survived. Everyone's doing well. Joy is okay. Harper's okay. Brothers are excited to meet their baby sister. So now I said that I said that there was going to be mostly good stories in here, but I had to include at least one sort of grotesque story just to make your stomachs turn, because I don't think it would be anything to do with my column if I didn't make you at least have some sort of visceral reaction where you might want to puke or you might want to just smash your head into your computer. So this is that story, and then I promise I put this in the middle for a reason, and then the other two that we will end with tonight will make you not feel this way. So this story is wild. It is out of India. So, this now, if I'm laughing, you guys, it's not because it's funny. It's because literally, I say literally a lot. Somebody said that in the comments from yesterday's video. I can't help it. Um, if I don't laugh, I might vomit because this is really okay. So, two nurses in India are like on the verge of getting fired because they decapitated a baby during delivery. So, Amrital and Jujahar are nurses at a hospital in India, and I apologize, I don't know how to pronounce all of these names. And the baby was breech and stuck in the mother. So instead of calling for a doctor, the two men pulled on the infant's legs so hard that they ripped the infant's torso from the neck down. So the mother, Diksha, it looks like, or Disha, went to a regional health center in India. When she arrived, she went into labor. Two nurses that were at the clinic were attended to her and assisted in the delivery. And according to the report in the Hindustan Times, the nurses who attended the birth did so without the help of a doctor. So when the baby's feet came out first, hold on a second, the two men decided to pull the baby out by the legs. However, the men applied so much force to the legs that they ripped the baby in half. When the torso and the legs of the body came out, the two men took the body to the morgue and they left the head of the infant inside of the mother. Next, the men sent her to a hospital, and when they got to the hospital, they told the doctors at the hospital that she had delivered a baby, but they had trouble delivering the placenta. So they'd never mentioned to the doctor that the head was still inside. So the doctors go into the room and they discover that the head of the infant is still inside of the mother. So they have to full on deliver the head out of her body. And then the doctor lets the mother and the father know what they found. So the mother and father literally had no idea that they had taken anything out of her. They had no idea that the baby was dead at this point. And so the notification from the doctor was the first time they heard anything. So what the doctors did was they called the police and they reported the incident. And then the police went to the health center to question the men. And the men admitted to pulling the baby's legs, splitting the body in half, and then they went to the morgue and got the remains of the body. So the administrators at this health center were investigating the incident. The director of the health center said that he was not at the facility at the time of the delivery. However, the center has nurses and doctors on staff to manage pregnancy and childbirth. Neither one of these nurses were skilled or trained for delivery. And instead of calling doctors, they decided to do this delivery themselves. So the men were suspended and they were conducting an internal investigation. What makes no sense is why these men decided to deliver this woman's baby, because she was at a clinic that had doctors that could have helped, and instead of getting doctors, they just decided to do it themselves. So the really sad part is that after all of this is said and done, the parents have no idea this happened. So she's in the delivery room and they have to tell her that she's, going to have no baby. And then on top of all of it, because of the way that everything went down, she actually went into critical condition and was placed on life support. So she was fighting for her life because of it. So the remains of the baby were sent to the medical examiner, and the medical examiner said he received the body in 3 parts: head, torso, and placenta. After a thorough review of the body, he determined that the baby sustained multiple fractures to their legs, and the men had used so much force that they caused the baby's liver to explode. Unfortunately, the doctor could not list the cause of death because he said, it's hard to know what was ever, which part caused what, but he said it was the force of being of them being pulled out that ultimately was the reason the baby died. Um, Despite all of this craziness, the men never got arrested for what they did. And the husband is refusing to bury the baby until police arrest him. So the local government found out about it, and they wanted, to have those men put under investigation and get this taken care of. But at the time that I wrote the article, none of that had happened. So, and I wanted to do follow up to see, if the mother survived, but I haven't had a chance to look into this story yet. But there's so many, I don't really know how healthcare is in India. The fact that I know like parts of like many cities of India are, very affluent in the 2019. They've gone through quite an economic boom. So I believe the fact that they're at a hospital, in a major city, this probably had nothing to do with like poverty. And so why these nurses made the decision to do this really baffles me. And if I were that woman's husband, I would be like at the police's door, like demanding those guys be put in jail, because clearly these guys had no business delivering this baby at all. Are the hospitals in India bad? I don't really know anything about India. I just know that I watched a documentary and I watched something recently that said that there's been an economic boom in parts of India at this time. So, there's been a lot of actually really crazy stories that have come out of India. There is another story. I didn't actually write about it. I only read about it, but a woman watched a video online, or I think on YouTube, about like free birth. And she decided that she was going to do like a stunt delivery. And she was in India when she did this. And this is an Indian woman that did it. And so they were going to videotape or film, I guess, the delivery. And she bled to death on film, like live streaming. I don't really understand this whole phenomenon of free birthing, but she literally bled to death live streaming. So I did not write that story, but if you were to Google it, I'm pretty sure you can find it. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. So that was the gross story of my birth stories. So I promise the other ones are not going to be, the other ones will be better. So this next story is actually pretty cool. It has nothing to do with anything gross. It's actually kind of a scientific miracle, to be quite honest. So a mother in Brazil, she delivered a baby, and so Brazilian doctors claimed a victory and a medical first that could mean big news for women with uterine fertility issues. So an article published in The Lancet, which is a medical journal. I love medical journals, if you know anything about me. Doctors say a patient underwent a uterine transplant surgery that she got from a dead patient and successfully delivered a baby girl following the transplant. So the patient received a donated uterus from a 45-year-old deceased woman who had had previous births. She delivered 3 babies. The patient was a 32-year-old woman who was born with a syndrome called, it's got an abbreviation, MRKH. It's a German name. I don't even know how to pronounce it. But basically the syndrome causes an absent uterus. So because the patient was born without a uterus, she didn't think she could ever have kids. So doctors believed they could help the woman reach her dream of motherhood, but according to an article that came out of Gizmodo, there are about 10 reported cases of live pregnancies following uterine transplants. But she was a good candidate for transplant surgery. But all of the previous live pregnancies that came from transplants came from live donors. So these were women that just got, they donated their uteruses, or they got rid of their uteruses, and then the live donor gave the uterus to somebody else. So in this case, the doctors decided they wanted to try a uterus from a deceased patient. And in every previous documented case of uterine transplant, all of the babies before were from, again, like from live donors. There had never been a case where they had tried from a dead patient. So they were fearful because they just really weren't sure how long the womb would remain viable after death. And so there was fear of trying this because they weren't sure if, the body was still, like, if the womb would die if you transplanted it in, would everything work? So what they did was they prepared her for transplant. They went through a cycle of in vitro for 4 months before the operation, and then they yielded 8 embryos, which were stored and frozen. And then on the day of the transplant, the doctors took the uterus from the deceased patient and transplanted the organ into the woman. And then the surgery took 10 hours. And she did really well. She had minimal complications. It said that she had stayed in the hospital for 8 days post-op, and then she went home. And then after she had the transplant, she had her first menstrual cycle 37 days after the surgery. So it sounds like she had ovaries. She just didn't have the uterus. So she had her own eggs. She just didn't have the little, the womb. So after her first menstrual cycle, her period remained regular for every 26 to 32 days. And then the doctors determined that the uterus was thick enough for pregnancy at about 7 months. And so at that point, they implanted embryos into the uterus. So only 7 months after she had received the donated womb, they put the embryos into her uterus. And then within weeks of that implantation, she got a confirmed pregnancy test. So she was pregnant. So doctors performed an ultrasound to ensure everything appeared normal and everything looked good. So after years of waiting to become a mother, she had believed she was never, ever, ever going to have a baby of her own, like from her own body. On December 2017, she delivered at 36 weeks gestation, and the baby was completely healthy. So doctors opted for the C-section delivery because that way they could take the baby out and remove the transplanted uterus in the same surgery. She did not want to have any more children, and so by removing the womb, she would be able to get the uterus out, and then she could go off of anti-rejection drugs, which would then make it safer for her to breastfeed. So the successful delivery of the live baby is an awesome outcome. They have an absolutely cool new way for babies to be born. They say that by using a deceased donor, they can actually reduce the overall cost to the patient because when you use a live donor, it takes like about 12 months for the uterus to be ready to have implantation. So they're able to cut off about 5 to 6 months of in like all of the fertility treatments that you would have to go through. And then they're able to actually cut the medical care down too, because she doesn't have to go through all the post-transplant stuff. She doesn't have to take the anti-rejection medications as long. She doesn't have to and the anti-rejection medication is really hard on the body. It causes immunosuppression, and so if you don't want to have a transplanted organ if you don't have to, is I guess the point here. So the biggest difference between like a uterine transplant and a regular organ transplant like a liver is it's optional, and so you don't have to have it in your body for as long as you'd have like a liver or a heart. So they can really just get rid of the uterus whenever they want to get rid of it. They don't expect this specific technique to replace donated tissue from a live donor, but they do think it'll provide an alternative method to a uterine transplant. And according to all accounts, the mother and the baby are doing amazing. She just celebrated her first birthday, and the doctors in Brazil have been able to authorize 2 additional donor transplants from diseased patients. So no, after she had the baby, they just I see your question, Scott. After they had the baby, they didn't. The uterus was just done. So she was done with the uterus. So, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of it's an interesting idea for a woman that's trans or a trans woman that might want to have a kid. I mean, uterine. And it was funny because when I wrote this story, I actually thought it was super cool. But then, like, some doctors and nurses that follow me, and I have a lot of doctors and nurses that follow me, some of them were actually kind of like irritated by this whole idea of a transplanted uterus because, anytime you have an foreign organ in your body, there's so many risks and there's so many, there's potential for all kinds of things can go wrong. And a lot of people were saying that she's selfish to do this and, why would she go through all of that just to have a baby? But I don't know. I guess I can kind of understand. I mean, if you have wanted to have your own baby, to be pregnant, to deliver it, and you had this opportunity and this option to try it, and the doctors are saying, there's minimal risk. She really only had to have the uterus in her body for what, a year and a half? So she didn't have to be on these anti-rejection drugs for very long. And her body should hopefully fully recover. I mean, anti-rejection medications are super hard on the body and they do make you completely immunosuppressed. So you become a lot more susceptible to getting all kinds of illnesses. But I thought it was a really neat opportunity for the woman. And then I also thought, some of my readers pointed out, like Jessie, that for a trans woman, it gives the trans woman maybe the option of doing that. But I'm not sure how that would work with a trans woman because then you would also need donated eggs as well. And so they weren't donating ovaries, it was just the uterus in this case. So, yeah, I would say it would probably be extremely high risk. You're right, Scott, for a trans woman. But it's not that I don't think it would be, I mean, the option's there, I guess, but it still would seem to be kind of difficult because you would still, in this case, she created her own eggs. So they didn't have to I don't know that they were able to do everything because they were able to get the uterus thick through the menstruation because of her eggs. So I don't really know how well that would work for a trans woman, but it's a cool option for those people. In the United States, these type of births have not been successful. There is yet to be a single baby born in the United States from a uterine transplant. They've attempted ones at Baylor, and the uterine transplant, the surgery was successful, but then the uterus failed within a day. And I think the only other ones that have been successful have been in Europe. I think in the UK, there's been a few. But thus far in the United States, there has not been a single successful uterine transplant at this time. So it was a pretty cool story because it was the first time anything like that had happened. So I kind of liked that. And I'm a nerd. I like nerdy stuff like that. All right. So, and then this story is the last one. Let me get it pulled up here. So this story is kind of crazy. If anyone follows my column, you will know that I write a lot about midwives and I write a lot about the natural childbirth movement. And there is a lot of discrepancy in the United States between, what the different levels of midwives. And so this case actually comes out of Australia. So it's a little bit different than in the United States. In the United States, we have lay midwives who are just basically just anybody can call themselves a midwives. There's a CPM, which is someone that has a high school diploma and trains with another midwife. And then we have certified nurse midwives, which are actual nurse practitioners that have advanced degrees and they work in hospitals. And so in the United States, the gold standard for midwives would be a CNM, and this case is derived from, or I guess revolves around, a C&M that's in Australia, because in Australia they are that's all that they have in Australia. They don't have like lay midwives there. So look up Laura Hamilton in Washington. My husband nearly died from her, and she just recently lost her license. Is she a midwife? I've never heard of her. I will definitely look her up though. So this case, we'll start here, is, so her name is Martina Gorner. She is from Germany, but she ended up moving to Australia, and she had opened a home birth services called 10 Moons in Melbourne. She helped a mother deliver a baby, and then when the mother attempted to deliver her placenta, another baby came out of her. The midwife's post went viral, and multiple risk factors in the birth became apparent to authorities. Today, the midwife is under investigation, and I'll kind of tell you what went wrong. So on October 19th, and many of you might have actually seen this photo. I'm going to just copy this and paste it into there really quick so you can see it. Bear with me. All right. So there's mom after she had the babies. The babies are absolutely purple and they look really unhealthy, and that's part of the problem, you guys. So here's what happened. On October 19th, Martina, the midwife, she went online and she went onto her Facebook page, and she showed a picture of the mother, whose name is Brooke, cradling two babies next to her chest. And on the post, she said that the babies were born at 8:03 and 8:07 a.m. The first baby weighed 5.1 pounds and the second baby weighed 4.8 pounds. After the post went up on the 10 Moons page, a mix of comments kind of started filling up the thread. Mothers that supported home birth offered tons of congratulations to Brooke and the new babies, but then others commented critically about how because basically Martina's post said, "Surprise! We had no idea she was having twins. Oh my gosh, look what happened." So she, people were pretty critical of how a registered nurse midwife could miss twins. And so comments were just directed to the fact that, like, how do you miss twins? And then the other comments that were directed was that one of the twins looked purple and very unwell, which I think you can notice. This guy right here is super, super purple. You can see his little hand right there is very, very purple. So they did very little to respond to what was going on, but we found a response where someone said, like, she didn't know she was pregnant with twins, and she said the mom decided not to have any scans during the pregnancy. So people are like bombarding this post. It is like literally everywhere on Facebook at this point. And 10 Moons then updates the post several hours later and says that an ambulance was called following the birth and the twins were transferred to the hospital. The twins arrived premature. One of the twins had respiratory difficulties, and both twins were admitted to the hospital. So the second baby that was purple was under 5 pounds, and it's probably the one that was actually having the respiratory distress. Obviously the babies were preemies, which, you know, makes them smaller in size. They can have low body temperature. They can have issues with breathing, issues with sucking, swallowing, all that good stuff. And typically babies born around 35 weeks will need about a week in the hospital. My son was born at 35 weeks. And when he was born, they said 35 weekers are usually in the hospital for 7 to 10 days. My son was in the hospital for almost 40, so he was pretty awesome. But these babies were in and out. They weren't in the hospital for very long. But after all of this happened, they get to the hospital, and someone at the hospital reports Martina to the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency. And they basically were concerned that the Martina had not given this woman any scans, and they were concerned that the baby looked really unwell. And so AHPRA, which is like the licensing and like regulatory board in Australia, they suspended her following this because she failed to provide adequate prenatal care for the mom. And because the mother refused scans, she was never able to diagnose the twins. And so twin deliveries carry a super high risk. And in this case, the twins shared one placenta, which is super high risk. So twins that share one placenta have the highest mortality rates of any other twin combination, because all of their like fluid is coming from the same source, and if the babies don't grow at the same rate, the placenta will sort of kick in and then give more fluid to the baby that's smaller, but then the baby that's bigger will get more fluid too. So it creates a lot of issues. And babies that have only one placenta, they have a really high mortality rate. So the fact that she was able to deliver these twins, to not know about them and then have them survive, they're extremely lucky. So to give you kind of an insight about this, so anyway, the midwife gets suspended for this. The babies thankfully survived and they're doing well now. But this midwife is something else. She, on her page, brags that these are their outcomes. She had, let's see, 3 moms went over 42 weeks. Apparently that's super awesome to her. I don't know why. She had 1 mom who had their water broken for 8 days. She had 20% had no ultrasounds. 91% had no gestational diabetes scans, and almost 100 or 99% denied having the vaginal swab for group B strep. She had 87 of their moms that have Rh negative blood declined RhoGAM, which is what helps the mother not develop antibodies to kill future babies. So these are not the kinds of stats you would want to actually brag about, period. And this apparently was what she did. She just, thought this was okay. Hey, I don't tell my people to actually get any sort of prenatal care. I don't tell them to get RhoGAM, and I counsel them out of getting gestational diabetes testing, and I don't have them get ultrasounds. Why are these things that you should be bragging about? We have testing for a reason. So Martina is suspended, and there's this whole massive online campaign, and all of her supporters are saying, it's a witch hunt, it's a witch hunt, she should never have been suspended, blah, blah, blah. They start this massive change.org campaign. They're full frontal out of everywhere, online, all over the place. Even the twin mom is defending her at this point. And of course there is always more to the story, right? Always more to the story. So Martina, after 5 months or so, just last month, decided to give back her license, or she was going to have her license taken off the registry, and she would no longer practice as a nurse midwife because she said that the government had enough time to, evaluate her and to they should know within 5 months whether or not she broke any rules. Interestingly, though, in the same letter where she posts it on Facebook, and when she got suspended, they effectively put a gag order on her where she could not use social media in any way, shape, or form. Yet she still found ways to sort of speak to her flock and brainwash them. And so she announced this extremely publicly. It was all for attention, and she ends up withdrawing her license or whatever. The thing is she was probably going to lose her license, because she admitted in this letter that she had had 9 complaints against her practice in only a few years. All of them had come from doctors who were concerned about her inability to give women adequate prenatal care. So it's insane. She is so lucky that these babies didn't die. She is so lucky that Brooke didn't die. And then she has to martyr herself by going online and saying, I'm giving up my license, when the truth is that the Australian government probably would have pulled her license anyway for what she did. And in the state of, in Australia, they do have a lot of rules because they have universal health care. And one of those rules is that midwives and nurses are not allowed to counsel women out of vaccines. They're not supposed to provide any misinformation about vaccines. And they're also supposed to provide all the informed consent about why, prenatal screening is done. And this is to prevent poor outcomes and to ensure that babies get vaccinated, because Australia has had a humongous anti-vax movement move through it. So the fact that she's telling people that she doesn't, my people don't get GBS screening. Babies die from group B strep all the time. That's not something you should brag about. Not having an ultrasound, why are you bragging about that? Ultrasounds help mothers prepare, and they ensure that the baby is developing safely. Not having screening for group B strep, not having screening for diabetes. Diabetes causes babies like Harper that are 15 pounds. Gestational diabetes left untreated can kill you. So it's insane to me that she would brag about this kind of stuff. Martina is one of the wildest cases in terms of a midwife I've seen. And listen, I've seen a lot of midwife cases that I have not enjoyed, but she loves to martyr herself. And I wrote a follow-up article when she actually turned in her license, and a lot of her fans came to attack me. So I am not seeing, I just wanted to see if you guys had any questions that I didn't answer, but I don't see any. So I was thinking that since today we did this talk, there's a bunch of midwife stories that I have that I could also do for another live stream. And I know a bunch of you had talked about wanting me to sort of dive into the story of Edgar Lopez. So I will plan to do those in the future. Probably what I'm going to be doing just for the next coming weeks is I have archives of stories, over 700 stories. And I thought that would be a really good place to start, because I have so much to tell and to share of different things that I've covered in the time that I've been writing. And so this was about birth, but I have all different topics. So if there's something that is interesting to you that you might want to know, today there was a story out about marijuana, and I have a bunch of articles on marijuana. I do plan to do a live stream in the future about the cancer quackery that goes along with CBD and THC. And I also intend to do some more stuff on essential oils and Jillian, and, you know, really just all the woo stuff too. But it's definitely nice for me to um, get a break sometimes from the woo. But that was a little bit of a woo for you on there. So yeah, please post about Hamilton. I can definitely take a look at that. I have tons and tons of stories about essential oils. I actually got suckered into doTERRA at one point. So I have a whole box of essential oils, and I figured for that live, I'll actually bring the box and show you all of the oils that I have. So essential oils are one that's funny. And I want to do an entire live just about mocking natural moms. So I have not talked to Miles Powers. He was actually on the Non Sequitur show, and I was supposed to be on the show, but the vMix was down, and so they had to use an alternate server, and so they didn't have space for me. So I'm super bummed, but I was supposed to like be on a live stream with him. I was so excited, but I wasn't able to do that. Um, so obviously we are at the end. It's been almost an hour. I can't believe how fast these go, you guys. I did get to 1,000 subscribers yesterday. I'm actually over 1,100 now. I cannot believe how quickly this page has been growing. It's been so awesome to share these stories with you guys, and I am having such a blast just, you know, that you are digging my content. If you have stories, or if there's people that you think are, you know, worthy, or you think I should look into, please send that information to me. I get so many story ideas from all of you, and I'm glad that you were able to enjoy tonight without, you know, feeling like you need to go cry into your pillow and maybe harm yourself. So that was kind of the goal in tonight's live stream. So before we go, just make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe, like, comment, share. And if you want to become a patron, make sure you check out my Patreon account. It's www.patreon.com/withoutacrystalball2. And then my Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter are in the descriptions. So if you have questions, you want to reach out to me, I'm always on Facebook. Jessie is always on Facebook with me. And I have a wild crew on Facebook. So I can't promise you that it's not, you won't get into fights, because you never know if a lactivist or an anti-vaxxer are going to show up. No, it's okay, Jessie. I love that you're on my page. It's amazing. Like, I love the engagement I get from people. So anyways, guys, have a good night. Thanks for watching tonight. See you tomorrow.